Got this Cobra 150 GTL DX here. Never seen one of these before in real life, in person, so didn't really know a whole lot about it. Seems like it's an okay radio. I wouldn't say that it's like something that somebody would consider to be like a super high power, high audio kind of like knife cutting radio or anything on the airwaves, but it's pretty reliable, I think, for what it is. Couple small things I had to do to it to get it to work right. So my local friend, gave this radio to me. Said if I can fix it, fix it. If not, just part it out, whatever. So I dug into it. The problem was that it was intermittent transmit. So 1 minute it would work, the next minute it wouldn't. It was real annoying. So I thought maybe one of the transistors was dead in it, because when you keyed it up and looked in the spectrum analyzer, you saw a signal. So you had TX, you knew you had TX, you you had audio, but you didn't have any power out on the watt meter. So that's kind of a sign of something's not right. But anyway, so what I usually do is just first thing is check for like bad solder connections, and sure enough, that's what it was. So you got your transistors here, you got your pre-driver and your driver. So I was tapping on the board. At first I just was tapping on the transistor, and it was coming back to life in TX. So you'd see it jump up on the spectrum analyzer, you'd see watts come out of it. I'm like, that's interesting. If you look at the bottom of the board, there's not a whole lot really going on down here, but over here is where where it's soldered, and it had basically just a cold solder joint. So I just sucked the solder out of it and then just reflowed it, and with my fingers crossed powered it back up, and so far so good. It's been pretty stable. It's not cutting out TX. I've been kind of tapping on the solder leads. Especially when you tap on the solder leads, it would definitely come to life and then short back out. So something, either it was a ground or a combination of ground and positive, wasn't getting to that pre-driver. But the radio is now fully functional, so it's pretty cool. Obviously the night watch is burned out, which is probably common for these. Again, performance wise, I wouldn't say that it's nowhere near like if guys have like modified Cobra 29s and stuff like that, with high percentage audio and RMS modified and all that stuff that guys can do. They can really hot rod like a 29. This doesn't have sideband, so it's just AM FM. People said that this was made by Ranger. I don't know. It says Philippines in the back. I don't really have a lot of history on these because I didn't ever use these or really even know about them back in the day. I wasn't really, I guess, around during the early part of the 2000s with radio. I was living in an apartment. I basically just had like a little Magnum 257 HP in the car, and I kind of just was at the bottom of my radio hobby. I still was in the hobby, but I really wasn't that active. I think I had a RCI 2970 N2 also that I really liked, that I ran, but that was about it. I didn't really have any desire to buy other radios and stuff. Living in an apartment, you can't do much with radio. I just did mobile, so I wanted smaller radios. Like Magnum 257 HPs were really good for that. So these radios and stuff kind of never really interested me. But it is a cool radio. I mean, it's got a pretty sensitive receiver on AM. This is minus 110.7 at 12 dB SINAD, so I say that's pretty good for an older radio. If we go to minus 67, there's RS9 right there. The meter looks good in it. It dims down and stuff, so that it would have been a lot prettier radio when the night watch was working, but that's just a common downfall of these Cobra radios. So let me hook it up and I'll show you guys the transmit on it. Alright, so it just has a high and a low power switch, so it's in high power right now, and it's about 8 watts. Just a dual final radio, so that's why I'm saying you can't expect a ton of power out of it. That's how it looks here, and if I modulate it, it looks pretty good. So let's see what it's doing over here. It's about 97%, so that's pretty good there. We'll go to the low power position, and it's about 94%. Can we get a little bit more out of it? I don't know, maybe. We'll try it just to see, but it seems like the radio works the best in the low power position anyways. Oh, that's too much. It's real touchy. It goes from about there to full on distortion, so you don't really want that. Probably those trimmers are a cheap low quality, because you would think that, you know, you could adjust it a little more accordingly, but that looks pretty good there. This is about 2 watts, so obviously it's going to be a little less here and very clean on the output, but you know, nonetheless, this is a 25 in there, so you can see what it's doing. Turn the mic gain down. It's actually a little under 2 watts. Oh, about 2 watts. I would like to turn it up just slightly. And go about 2 1/4. That's better. And we'll run that test again. And just see what happened. It's about 95%, so that's pretty darn good there. And that's, I mean, that's really it from the radio. It's not a super like powerful powerhouse radio. I haven't tested FM on it yet, so we're still in AM. I'm not really going to bother with FM on a video. FM's pretty straightforward. There's a deviation control. I'll adjust it for what I find accordingly, for what I would want. Not that I would probably ever use FM on this anyway, because really don't use that here. 25 watt element in there, so there's our 2 watts, and it swings, I don't know, 10. This bird, again, guys that love bird meters, I understand they are fun and everything, but I just don't like the accuracy. And this is a real 43p. It was bought new. Again, aside from maybe you like the analog style meter, the way more accurate meter to get is this meter. And once in a while, you know, this meter will show a higher level too. So, you know, to say that the bird isn't accurate, I think is an understatement. It is accurate, but I think that this meter here captures the peaks in a much faster time frame, and therefore you can see a more accurate, you know, display as you speak. So this meter, they get hung up and stuff, and you know, they want to fall back, but then they don't. So I would not say that what we're seeing down there is a true interpretation of the power, but of course watts sell, so you would show this to say, look what I did to your radio, and you know, versus maybe before, if you were to show this, maybe it wouldn't be as impressive. So you know, it's kind of like it could go either way. Here's the high power, so it's like 8 watts. Here's the frequency of it. It's pretty close to being spot on. This will probably peg the scale, yeah. So again, it's a little higher power in the high power position, but again, you got an 8 watt carrier now, so you have to realize that. Hello radio, 1 2 3 1 2 3. So about 40 or so at the very maximum peak maybe, but really it's not really up that much all the time. So this is not like a powerhouse modulation machine radio. I think it's just a general, like, kind of like, it reminds me a lot of like the President Richard, kind of how that radio works, performance side. So it's kind of like that. It's a very good sounding radio, but it's not gonna like blow somebody away with like, man, that thing is loud, and you know, look at all that power and stuff. So that's not the reason for this radio. And I think maybe when people were buying these back in the day, I think these were out in what, the early 2000s or something, guys maybe expected too much out of them, and maybe that's why a lot of them failed so early in their lifetime, because you know, they tried to tweak them for absolute maximum and everything, and you know, you can get a lot of distortion out of these, but it doesn't help you in the long run. I don't have any experience with the 200 GTL. I think that one was a sideband model also, but I have heard that those were very susceptible to being blown up and stuff, probably just due to the ideology of the golden screwdriver with the dozy watt meter and all that stuff that really don't know what they're doing. They just get in there and they're yelling and screaming in the mic looking for more watts. So I get that watts are important in the radio, they're important to me too, but you know, at the end of the day, we got to realize what we got in front of us is only capable of working a certain way. And you know, once you go beyond that, you probably just end up taking the lifespan out of the radio. If not, just it'll quit working one day just because of over adjusting things and stuff. So you know, it's a cool little radio. Is it something that, you know, is like, oh man, this is the end all be all? No, it's a good working radio, but that's really all you can say about it. It's definitely pretty looking. It'd be nice if that night watch worked, but it still looks good, you know, for what it is. And I'm going to put it back together, and we'll just quickly, actually I'll just put it on the air really quick and we'll listen to the receiver. I need to put the external speaker back on. One thing I don't understand about it is why on earth did they decide to put this huge heatsink inside the board? This is only a 40 watt radio. You could have put a small heatsink on the back and not had this thing built in, but they make it look more, probably because I think the 200 probably is the same chassis, so maybe this, they didn't want to change it, and the 200 needs this obviously with the 220 290s. But on this one you could have done away with this. It's not needed. You could have put a small heatsink on the back. That's just me thinking. Here's the receiver on the 150 GTL DX.
I have this radio in my car, and my Subaru, and I can't believe how quiet it is. There's no, I had my 29 in my other car, truck.
It's got a hell of a A&L noise blanker.
I'll never put that in another car again. This thing was so quiet. There was no noise.
That's exactly what I experienced. You know, I had 29s and 148s and grants and all that stuff. I put that regular guy to holy mackerel. Super quiet. And everybody come in when they talked, it was just clear as a bell. I was really impressed.
Yeah, that's the way this one is. Yeah, I'll never put another CB radio in my car again. This one, I'm going to buy another one like this one.
So she's real quiet. I think these are the upper channels. When it goes 0.1, like 415, stuff like that. As well as if you go down to the bottom, your A channels are blinked right there, or dotted. So I think if you go down, yeah, now it's in the lower band without changing this. I believe it went down in frequency. So there's a counter jack on the back, I believe, or there's a way to wire a counter up. I don't remember. Yeah, there's a counter jack on the back. I don't know if the Ranger / Galaxy, probably the older ones would work. I don't know. I would never want a frequency counter on this because, you know, it's kind of used for just one band, you know, if I was going to use it. So 10K doesn't do anything. I wonder what that does. I wonder if they switched that, or else maybe when it's in export mode like it is, maybe it doesn't work. I'm not really sure. Whoops. Not really sure why that doesn't work, but might be something else to look into. But I'm sure there's a reason why it's not working. Maybe it only works on the upper bands. Let's try it. Go back to the dummy load. But anyways, that's the receiver. Sometimes there's a small like popping noise in the receiver, which I think also gets into the transmit audio. There's a technical service bulletin that you have to do up in this area. I'm probably going to do that at a later date. I think it's a 1 UF capacitor that you put on there. So you scrape away a little bit of the surface on the hot side, and then just some ground, and solder that capacitor onto the board, and that takes care of that. But it's the first time I noticed that little bit of popping sound. So there's 27415. Let's see if this 10K does anything. not seeing that it's doing anything. There's 425. It should skip. 435. 445. I guess it doesn't need it. So see how it's dot dot? A normal export radio would skip over right here. 435, and then I'm assuming it would go to 445. There's 455. So what's this? Yeah. So I think the dot dot means that you're in that A channel range. Yeah. So you really don't need a frequency counter because you know that you're going up and you have 2 dots. So you're 7, 8, 9 kcs up, you know. So now we're 14 up. So because we have 3 A channels basically. So the A channels are the second dot. So it makes sense. It really does make sense. I'm assuming maybe an export just doesn't work. So you could use it for something else maybe, or just not worry about it. So what is this? It's a high band. That's weird. Where does this go? All the way down, we'll see. So it kind of starts over. That's strange. Don't really know the thought process and what they did with this, but when it was messing up and I wasn't getting TX, it was a little difficult to figure out what band does what. This is A band. That's your low band there. I'm sure there's a chart on like CB Tricks or something that shows you everywhere the radio goes, but that's your low band. And then where's this? High band. $10-meter. Yeah, so that's good enough for me. I'm just gonna hang on to this one. I think it's kind of like probably a little rare one to have. I don't know. It's not, like I say, it's not anything spectacular, but I appreciate that my friend let me have it and I was able to fix it. So stuff like that I don't generally get rid of, especially when it comes from a good friend from the radio. I like to hang on to stuff because it's a little like sentimental, you know, because people don't have to give you anything, you know. So when they give you something, I kind of prefer just to hang on to it. And one day I'll pull this out and enjoy using it. So, and if he ever needs a radio or something, obviously I'll give it back to him and he can talk on it, because it's technically, although it's given to me, I still consider it his radio at the end of the day. But you know, it is what it is. So it's a Cobra 150 GTL. I need to do that technical service bulletin on it, and then I think it'll be fine. 73.